The Stranger's Journal. Part 1. The Discovery. It was a calm Sunday afternoon. The sky was gray, and a cool breeze moved through the empty streets. Claire, a quiet woman in her late 20s, had spent most of her day cleaning her small apartment. Her day had been simple, like any other, but she didn't know that things were about to change. Claire was cleaning out her closet, pulling out boxes filled with old books, clothes, and forgotten memories. In the corner, under an old blanket, she noticed a small leather-bound book she had never seen before. The cover was dusty, and the edges were worn. It looked like it had been hidden away for years. Curious, Claire picked it up. The leather felt soft yet worn, and the pages inside looked fragile and yellowed with time. On the first page, in neat handwriting, were the words, "This journal belongs to Samuel Green." She paused. Who was Samuel Green? She had never met anyone by that name. With a sense of wonder, Claire began flipping through the pages. At first, the entries seemed ordinary, like any personal journal. They described places, feelings, and experiences that didn't seem to connect to her at all. But then, as she continued reading, she froze. One entry seemed oddly familiar. The entry described a woman sitting by the window, sipping coffee and staring at the rain outside. It described her feeling of emptiness and the way she felt lost and alone. Claire felt a chill as she read. This could have been a description of her own life. She had sat by that same window many times, feeling that same way. She shrugged it off, thinking it was just a coincidence. But as she read on, she found more details that seemed to match her own life. There was an entry about a woman who had recently lost her mother. Claire's mother had passed away only a year ago. Another entry talked about a small scar on the woman's wrist from an accident. Claire looked down at her own wrist, where a faint scar from a childhood accident was still visible. The more she read, the more uneasy she felt. How could a stranger's journal describe her life in such detail? Claire's heart pounded as she read deeper into the journal. The entries began to feel personal, like someone had been watching her, writing about her every move, every feeling. She considered stopping, but her curiosity pushed her to keep going. She needed to know how this journal could be so accurate about her life. The entries moved from the past to the present, describing events that had happened recently. There was a mention of a lost job, which had happened to her only a few weeks ago. She felt like she was trapped, unable to look away from the words on the page. Finally, she reached an entry that described something she hadn't experienced. Yet, it talked about a man with dark eyes who would come into her life unexpectedly. He would seem kind, but he would bring trouble and danger. The journal said he would offer her something she would be tempted to accept, but warned that accepting it would lead her down a dark path. Claire shivered. She put the journal down and tried to laugh it off. This was just a strange coincidence. She told herself it was impossible for someone to write about her life, let alone predict her future. But as the night wore on, Claire couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The journal lay on her table, closed but somehow still calling to her. She told herself she would put it back in the closet and forget about it. But deep down, she knew she couldn't. Part 2. The Dark Eyes. The next day, Claire tried to go back to her normal life, but her thoughts kept drifting to the journal. She couldn't forget the strange details that seemed to match her life exactly. She spent the whole morning telling herself it was just a coincidence. Yet deep down, she knew she didn't fully believe that. As she went through her daily routine, her mind kept returning to the last entry she had read. The journal had described a man with dark eyes who would come into her life. It had warned her to stay away, to not accept any offer from him. But how could she believe something so strange? And who was Samuel Green, the writer of this journal? Why would he know anything about her? That afternoon, Claire decided to go to her favorite cafe. It was a small place, cozy and quiet, where she often went to read or just sit and think. She hoped that being there would help her forget the strange thoughts the journal had planted in her mind. She ordered her usual cup of coffee and took a seat by the window. The cafe was nearly empty, with just a few people sitting around, reading or working on their laptops. She was starting to relax, letting the warm aroma of coffee calm her. Just then, the door of the cafe opened, and a man walked in. Claire looked up briefly, not really paying attention at first. But then her gaze froze. The man had dark eyes. They were so deep and intense that they seemed to pull her in, making her heart skip a beat. She shook her head, trying to clear her mind. It was probably just her imagination, a silly coincidence. But the man looked straight at her and gave a polite nod, as if he knew her. Claire quickly looked away, feeling her face flush. She told herself she was being ridiculous. Just because he had dark eyes didn't mean he was the man from the journal. There must be hundreds of people with dark eyes, right? The man ordered his coffee and, to her surprise, walked over to her table. He smiled, a friendly but mysterious smile. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, holding his cup. Claire hesitated but forced herself to stay calm. "Sure," she replied, trying not to seem nervous. He introduced himself. "I'm David," he said, extending his hand. She shook it, feeling his firm grip. "I'm Claire," she said softly, wondering if he could sense her unease. They started talking casually. David was charming and easy to talk to, and soon Claire began to relax. He spoke about his work and his love for books, which made her feel like they had something in common. She almost forgot about the strange warning in the journal. She reminded herself that she couldn't live her life based on some old book. But just as she started to feel comfortable, David leaned forward and said, "I actually have a small business project, and I'm looking for someone to help me with it. You seem like the right person." Claire's stomach tightened. She remembered the journal's warning. "He will offer you something you will be tempted to accept." She forced herself to smile. "Oh, what kind of project?" David explained that he was working on a series of travel articles and needed help with writing and organizing them. He offered her a chance to work with him on this project, saying it would pay well and could even lead to more opportunities. Claire felt a strange pull. She had been struggling financially since she lost her last job, and this opportunity sounded perfect. She almost said yes, but then she remembered the journal's warning once more. It had told her to stay away from this man, to reject his offer. She tried to be polite. "That sounds interesting, but I'm not sure I'm the right fit," she said, hoping he wouldn't press further. David's expression changed for just a moment, a flicker of disappointment in his dark eyes. But he smiled again, saying, "No problem. Think about it. Here's my card. If you change your mind, give me a call." He placed the card on the table and left. Claire watched him go, her mind swirling with confusion and fear. She wanted to believe this was all just a strange coincidence, but something inside her felt certain that the journal's warning had been real. That night, Claire sat in her apartment with the journal in her hands. She felt like it was pulling her in, whispering that it held answers to her questions. She took a deep breath and turned to the next entry. The new entry seemed to describe the very conversation she had just had with David. It said, "He will appear kind, but there is a darkness within him. Do not trust him, for he hides his true intentions. If you accept his offer, you will find yourself trapped in something you cannot escape." Claire's hands shook as she read. How could the journal know about her conversation with David? It described everything so perfectly, almost like it had been watching her. She felt a chill run down her spine. She wanted to throw the journal away, but a strange force made her keep reading. As she continued, the entries grew darker. They talked about someone close to her facing danger because of her choices. It didn't say who, but the thought terrified her. She was filled with dread, knowing that this was more than just a journal. It was like a map of her future, and she was walking right into it. For the next few days, Claire avoided David. She didn't answer his calls, and whenever she saw him around town, she hid. But she couldn't stop thinking about him. His charming smile, his dark eyes, and the strange connection she felt with him. It was all so confusing. One evening, as she was leaving the grocery store, she spotted David across the street. He didn't see her, but she watched him from a distance. He was talking to someone, his expression serious. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw a darker side to him in that moment. His face looked different, almost cold. That night, Claire went back to the journal. She felt an urge to find out more, to see if there was any way to avoid the dark path it described. But as she turned each page, she realized that the journal was more than just a warning. It was like a trap, pulling her deeper and deeper. She began to feel that she couldn't change her future. The journal's words seemed unbreakable, like a curse she couldn't escape. Part 3. The shadows begin to fall. Days turned into weeks, and Claire couldn't shake the feeling that her life was no longer her own. She felt watched, controlled, like someone else was pulling the strings. Every time she opened the journal, it seemed to predict her next steps. She tried to ignore it, tried to live her life as she normally would, but the journal's words seemed to follow her everywhere. One evening, Claire sat alone in her apartment, staring at the journal on her coffee table. She had tried hiding it away in her closet, but each night, she found herself bringing it back out. There was something magnetic about it, like it was calling her, making her need to read just one more page. Reluctantly, she opened the journal again and turned to the next entry. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the words. She will try to escape her fate, but the path is already set. Soon, she will face a choice, a decision that will change everything. Once she makes this choice, there is no turning back. A heavy feeling settled in her chest. The words felt final, like a warning she couldn't ignore. She wondered what kind of choice it was talking about. The idea of being trapped made her feel helpless. How could a book, a simple old journal, know so much about her life? Just then, her phone rang, startling her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was her friend Lily. Claire felt relieved. Lily was one of the few people she trusted completely. "Hey, Claire." Lily's voice was cheerful as always. "I haven't seen you in ages. Want to meet up?" Claire smiled, feeling a little bit of her tension fade away. "Yes, I'd love that. Let's meet at the cafe tomorrow." They agreed on a time, and for the first time in days, Claire felt a bit of hope. She decided that she would tell Lily everything. The journal, the strange predictions, and her growing fear about David. She felt that sharing this burden would make her feel lighter. The next day, Claire arrived at the cafe early. She chose a table by the window, watching people pass by as she sipped her coffee. After a few minutes, she saw Lily walk in, her bright smile lighting up the room. Claire waved, and Lily joined her at the table. They talked about simple things at first, the weather, work, and mutual friends. But Claire's mind kept going back to the journal. She hesitated, wondering if Lily would think she was crazy, but she needed to tell someone. Taking a deep breath, Claire started. "Lily, I have something strange to tell you. I found this old journal, and it describes my life, almost every detail. And it also warns me about things I haven't experienced yet." Lily looked at her with a puzzled expression but listened patiently as Claire described the strange entries and how they seemed to predict her life. Claire also told her about David and the eerie feeling she had whenever he was around. When Claire finished, Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That sounds really creepy, Claire. But maybe it's just some kind of strange coincidence. Or maybe you're just seeing patterns that aren't really there." Claire shook her head. "No, Lily, it's more than that. It's too detailed. It's like someone is watching me, writing down everything that happens." Lily reached across the table and held her hand. "Listen, if this is making you feel so scared, maybe you should stop reading it. Just put it away, or even get rid of it." Claire nodded, but she wasn't sure if she could really let it go. The journal felt like a part of her now, something she couldn't just ignore. As they sat there in silence, Claire noticed a familiar figure enter the cafe. Her heart sank. It was David. He looked around, spotted her, and walked over with his usual calm smile. "Hello, Claire," he said smoothly. "It's good to see you." Claire felt a chill but forced herself to stay calm. "Hi, David," she replied, keeping her voice steady. David turned to Lily and gave her a polite nod. "Mind if I join you two for a bit?" Claire wanted to say no, but Lily, not sensing the tension, smiled and said, "Of course." David took a seat, and for a few moments, they made small talk. David was charming as always, speaking warmly and asking about their day. Claire felt trapped, knowing that the journal had warned her about him, yet unable to walk away. Then, David looked directly at her, his eyes as dark and deep as the journal had described. "I was actually hoping to ask you about my offer again, Claire. I could really use your help with the project." Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. She had almost forgotten about his offer, the one the journal had told her to avoid. She wanted to refuse, to tell him she wasn't interested. But as she looked into his eyes, she felt herself hesitate. Something inside her wanted to accept, to take a chance and ignore the warnings. She felt an odd pull toward him, as if he had some kind of hold over her. Lily noticed her hesitation and gave her a small, concerned look. "I'm sorry, David," Claire finally managed to say. "I just don't think I can commit to it right now." David's smile faded slightly, and for a moment, his expression darkened. "Are you sure, Claire? I think you'd be perfect for it, and it could really help you out." Claire took a deep breath, forcing herself to stand her ground. "Yes, I'm sure. Thank you for the offer, but I have to decline." David stared at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of something unsettling. "If you change your mind, you know where to find me." With that, he stood up, gave her one last look, and walked away. Claire let out a sigh of relief, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. But Lily was watching her closely. "Claire, are you okay?" Lily asked, her voice filled with concern. "You seemed really uncomfortable around him." Claire nodded, her heart still racing. "I'm fine. I can't explain it. He just gives me a strange feeling." Lily put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, Claire. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." They finished their coffee, and Claire felt grateful for Lily's support. But later that night, alone in her apartment, Claire felt the heavy silence around her. She knew that even though she had refused David's offer, the danger wasn't over. She picked up the journal, almost afraid to turn to the next page. But her hands moved on their own. Flipping it open, she read the next entry with a pounding heart. Her decision will bring her a moment of peace, but the darkness is not done with her. Soon, someone close to her will pay the price for her choice. Claire's heart sank. She looked around her quiet room, feeling like the walls were closing in. Who would suffer because of her decision? What price would she have to pay for refusing David's offer? That night, she couldn't sleep. The shadows seemed longer, the silence thicker, and somewhere in her mind, a question echoed. Was there really no escape? Part 4. The Price of a Choice. Claire woke up the next morning feeling heavy and exhausted. Her dreams haunted by shadows and whispers she couldn't remember. The journal's words echoed in her mind. Someone close to her will pay the price for her choice. Trying to shake off the fear, Claire prepared for work, though the warning stayed with her all day. Every time her phone buzzed or she heard a knock, her heart raced, afraid of bad news. She tried to distract herself by focusing on her tasks, but her mind kept drifting back to the journal. A few days later, she got a call from Lily. "Hey, Claire." Lily's voice sounded cheerful. "I have the day off, and I thought we could spend some time together. Maybe we could go shopping or see a movie." Claire's worry melted a little. Being with Lily always helped her feel better, as if she could forget about the strange things going on. "That sounds great, Lily. Let's meet up at the mall around noon." They agreed on a time and place, and for the first time in days, Claire felt hopeful. Maybe being around her friend would help her feel normal again. When Claire arrived at the mall, she spotted Lily right away, waving happily from a bench near the entrance. They greeted each other with hugs, and soon they were laughing and chatting as if everything was normal. They wandered from store to store, looking at clothes, trying on hats, and joking about the styles. For a moment, Claire forgot all about the journal and its dark warnings. After a while, they decided to grab a quick lunch at a small cafe inside the mall. They chose a cozy corner table, ordered some sandwiches and coffee, and continued chatting. But as they were talking, Claire noticed something strange. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw someone watching them from across the cafe. Her heart skipped a beat. It was David. David didn't look away when she noticed him. Instead, he stared directly at her, his gaze dark and intense. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. What was he doing here? Was he following her? "Claire, are you okay?" Lily's voice brought her back, and Claire realized she had been staring. I'm fine," Claire replied, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. She didn't want to worry Lily, but her mind was racing. She glanced back, but David was gone. She wondered if she'd imagined him, or if he'd actually been there, watching her. After lunch, Claire and Lily decided to take a walk outside to get some fresh air. They strolled along the busy sidewalks, chatting and laughing, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every time she looked over her shoulder, she thought she saw a shadow or a quick movement, but when she looked closer, there was nothing. Finally, they reached a small park. Lily suggested sitting by the fountain, so they found a quiet bench. The sounds of the splashing water and the chirping birds made the park feel peaceful, a nice change from the crowded mall. As they sat there, Lily took Claire's hand and gave it a squeeze. "Claire, I know you're dealing with a lot right now. I don't know what's going on. But remember, I'm always here for you." Claire felt a wave of gratitude and relief. "Thank you, Lily. I can't explain it, but it's been hard to feel safe lately. I keep thinking about things I can't control." Lily nodded, listening carefully. "If you ever need to talk, or if something's bothering you, Just call me. Okay? Claire nodded, feeling comforted by her friend's words. The two sat there in silence for a while, enjoying the calm of the park. For a moment, Claire felt like maybe things would be okay. But then, something happened that shattered that peaceful moment. Suddenly, there was a loud screeching sound of tires skidding on the road nearby. Claire and Lily looked up just in time to see a car speeding toward the park. The driver seemed to lose control, and the car swerved toward the bench where they were sitting. Claire's instincts kicked in. "Lily, move!" she yelled, grabbing her friend's arm and pulling her out of the way. They both stumbled and fell to the ground, just as the car crashed into the bench where they had been sitting. People screamed, and a crowd gathered quickly. Claire's heart pounded as she looked over at the car. The driver was slumped over the wheel, looking dazed and confused. It looked like an accident, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a coincidence. She knew, deep down, that this was somehow connected to the journal's warning. She turned to Lily, who was shaken but unhurt. "Are you okay?" Claire asked, her voice shaky. Lily nodded, but her face was pale. I think so." That was so close. Claire's mind raced. Someone close to her will pay the price for her choice. She had refused David's offer, and now her best friend had almost been hurt. Was the journal somehow right? Was this the price it warned her about? After the accident, Claire and Lily decided to go back home. The excitement of their day had turned into fear and confusion. Claire felt guilty, wondering if her decision had put Lily in danger. She knew she had to get to the bottom of this mystery. She couldn't let her friend be hurt because of her. Later that night, back at her apartment, Claire couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She picked up the journal, flipping through its pages, searching for answers. Her hands were shaking as she read the next entry. "She will begin to understand the truth, but the danger is not over. The closer she gets to the truth, the more those around her will be at risk. To end this, she must go to the source. She must find him." The words were clear, but they filled Claire with dread. Find him. Did this mean she had to confront David? Was he the source of all these strange events? But as she thought about it, something else struck her. If she didn't do something soon, the people she loved would continue to be in danger. The journal had already warned her, and now she could see the warnings coming true. With a determined heart, Claire knew what she had to do. She would face David and find out the truth, even if it meant risking everything. The next day, Claire waited until dusk. She had done some research and discovered that David often stayed late at his office. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage, and headed toward his building. As she approached the entrance, she felt a wave of fear, but she forced herself to keep walking. She entered the building and made her way up to his office, her heart pounding in her chest. When she reached his door, she hesitated. She could still turn back. She didn't have to face him. But then she thought of Lily and the people she cared about. She couldn't back down now. She knocked on the door. A moment later, David opened it, looking surprised, and then pleased to see her. "Claire," he said, his voice as smooth as ever. "I didn't expect you." Claire swallowed her fear and looked him straight in the eyes. "I need answers, David. About everything. The journal, the strange things happening, and about you. I want the truth." David's face changed, a strange look passing over his eyes. He gave a small smile, but it was different this time, darker, almost sinister. "Well," he said slowly, "I suppose it's time you learn the truth. But be careful, Claire. Sometimes the truth is far darker than you can imagine." Claire felt a shiver run down her spine, but she steeled herself. She was ready, no matter what. Part 5. The Final Truth. Claire stepped into David's office, her heart racing. The room was dimly lit, filled with shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. She looked around, noticing the strange symbols and objects scattered across his desk. There were old books, candles, and a small mirror that caught her eye. It all felt very mysterious and a little frightening. David closed the door behind her, his smile fading. "You want the truth, Claire?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "It's not something you can easily forget. Are you sure you're ready?" Claire nodded, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Yes, I need to know. The journal is about me, and I want to understand what it means." David walked over to his desk and picked up one of the old books. It looked worn, as if it had been read many times. He opened it and began to read aloud. In the beginning, there was a choice, a decision made that changed everything. Some people can see into the future, and their visions can be written down. But these visions can also bring danger. A choice made in fear can lead to terrible outcomes. Claire listened carefully, her mind racing. "Is that what the journal is? Someone's vision of my life?" David nodded slowly. "Yes, it is. The journal belongs to a woman named Elara. She had the gift of foresight. She could see events before they happened, but her visions often came with a price. If she didn't act on them, the danger would fall on those she cared about." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. "So, when I read it, it was like I was taking on her burden?" "Exactly," David said. "But there's more. Elara wrote those warnings for a reason. She was trying to protect the ones she loved. The darker the predictions, the more danger loomed over them." Claire's heart sank. "But I can't just change the future. What do I do?" David looked deeply into her eyes. "You must confront your fears. You must face what is coming and make the right choice. It is not just about you anymore. It's about everyone you love." Claire felt tears forming in her eyes. "What if I can't? What if I make the wrong choice and something bad happens to Lily or my family?" David's expression softened. "You have the power to change the future. Claire, you must trust yourself. Remember, fear can cloud your judgment. You need to face what is scaring you most." As Claire listened, she felt a strange sensation wash over her. Suddenly, memories flooded back to her. moments with Lily, her family, and all the times she felt fear grip her heart. She realized that it wasn't just the journal that caused her fear. It was her own uncertainty about what the future held. "Okay," Claire said, her voice shaking but determined. "I will do whatever it takes to protect my loved ones." "But how?" David walked to the mirror on his desk, holding it up for her to see. "This mirror shows visions of the past, present, and future. You must look into it and confront the darkness that threatens you. Only then can you understand how to make the right choice." Claire took a deep breath, feeling a mix of fear and hope. She stepped forward, staring into the mirror. At first, all she saw was her own reflection. But then, images began to swirl around her. Lily laughing, her family smiling, and then the dark car accident that almost happened in the park. She gasped, pulling back. "No, I don't want to see that." "Look deeper," David urged. "You need to understand what you're afraid of." With a trembling heart, Claire forced herself to look again. This time, she saw more. She saw herself standing between the car and Lily, shouting for her to move. She saw a vision of herself making a brave choice, stepping into danger to protect her friend. Suddenly, she understood. It wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about facing it head-on. Claire realized she had to be brave, not just for herself but for those she loved. As the visions faded, Claire felt a sense of peace wash over her. "I see it now. I have to be strong. I have to protect them." David smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Remember, Claire, fear can guide you, but it should never control you. Trust your instincts. The future can change, but only if you act." Claire nodded, feeling empowered. She thanked David for his guidance and left his office, her heart feeling lighter. She knew what she had to do. She would not let fear hold her back any longer. The next day, Claire met Lily at their favorite cafe. This time, she felt different, stronger. They ordered coffee and sandwiches, chatting and laughing like they always did. But Claire kept a close eye on their surroundings, ready to protect her friend if anything happened. As they talked, Claire decided to share what she learned. "Lily, I need to tell you something important," she began, her voice steady. "I've been scared lately, but I realized that I need to face my fears. I don't want anything bad to happen to you or anyone I love." Lily looked concerned but nodded. "I'm here for you, Claire. Whatever you need, just say it." With each word, Claire felt her courage grow. She explained everything about the journal and the visions, how it warned her about the dangers that surrounded them. "I know it sounds crazy," Claire said, looking down, "but I have to be strong. I can't let fear win. We need to stick together and face whatever comes our way." Lily reached across the table and took Claire's hand. "You're not crazy. I believe you. And I'll stand by you, no matter what." Just then, Claire noticed a shadow passing by the cafe window. It was a dark figure, and it sent a shiver down her spine. But this time, instead of panicking, she felt a wave of determination. She squeezed Lily's hand tighter, ready to protect her friend at all costs. The figure stopped outside the cafe, and to Claire's surprise, it was David. He looked worried, his expression serious. He stepped inside and approached their table. "Claire, we need to talk," he said urgently. "I've seen something in the mirror that worries me." Claire's heart raced. "What is it? Is it about us?" David nodded, looking grave. "There's a storm coming. You must be prepared for what lies ahead." Claire and Lily exchanged worried glances. "What do we need to do?" Claire asked, her voice steady. "Stay together and trust each other. Keep your eyes open. The truth is unfolding, and you must be ready to act when the time comes." Claire took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. But she was no longer afraid. With Lily by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. As they sat together, Claire realized that the journal's warnings had brought her closer to her friend. She knew now that love and courage could conquer fear, no matter how dark the future seemed. And with that thought, Claire felt a sense of hope blossom in her heart. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it, armed with the strength of her friendship and the power of her own choices. In that moment, Claire understood. The future was not something to fear, but something to embrace with an open heart.